I've recently received quite a few requests to do a series of videos on fixing rust on these older cars. I've got a few videos up there. You know I talk about rust, how I feel about rust, and some of the products that we use and carry on our website to fix rust. But now we're going to get into some real detail. We're going to show you some real specific examples of how to fix what I call non-structural. This is rust in the car that does not affect the structure or the strength of the car, okay? We're not talking about rust in the frame or major body rust, which affects, like for instance, the quarter panels. And I'm sure some of you are already thinking this. I know for a fact some of you are saying, well, Kent, you're talking about rust and you're standing by this absolute pristine 240D here. Well, remember, all is not as it appears when it comes to rust, particularly on certain models of Mercedes-Benz and particularly on the W123 chassis. I'll explain as we go through these video series. We'll talk about different chassis and how they are prone to rust, where the rust starts, where the rust will grow to. But I want to start on this chassis, and I've got this car in the shop here today, and because it is such a nice appearing old diesel, I want to show you a few examples of what you need to look at and what you might have to deal with if you own one of these. You have the people that are going out to buy one, and that's really important. You know what you're looking for, and then of course if you own one and do discover some rust situations, you want to know how to deal with it. So that's what this video series is going to be about. I don't know how many parts. This could end up being a rather long series depending upon how well received it is. So what I want to do is first off take a look at this car. As we just look down the side of it here, you would walk up to this car and say, man, this car is absolutely pristine. And if it were for sale, you might be so enamored with it because of the condition of the paint and the interior and how well it runs to say, you know, I'm going to buy this car. You know, fork out the cash and drive away, only to discover a few weeks later, uh-oh, we got some problems. And yes, there are some problems with this car. And I want to begin by kind of explaining. And you know, you've seen this before in some of my other videos. I talk about how rust starts and how it grows. But just a quick review of some of the key spots you want to be looking for when you look at these old cars, and then we're going to get into more specifically some of the issues with the W123. One of the first places I look at when I walk around one of these old Mercedes is I check right here in this forward inner fender panel and down along the jack point, and I'm seeing something here that I don't like. It's starting to flake up and you can see the rust here. So this makes me suspicious right off the bat. Once again, if you see rust like this, this is not the only rust in the car. Keep that in mind as we walk around the rest of the car and I point out a couple other areas. Now you can see here the rear jack point looks pretty good, and right along this rocker I don't see any evidence of rust. This car has been in Washington State its whole life. It has not been exposed to road salt, so you're not going to see excessive underbody rust like you see in cars that have been driven in those areas, but you're going to see rust related to rain and rainwater. So let's move to the back fender. I'll show you another key area. This is another area that can suffer because you have water and mud coming off the rear of the back tire, and it impacts up in this area. Right here, you can see the bubbling in the paint, and that's something you really want to watch for. Once again, I can feel in behind here some roughness, so we've had some rust. It even appears that this might have been tried to be repainted. So we're already looking at two areas of rust here. Now I'm really getting suspicious. The next thing I do is open the door and look underneath the door and look at this. I'm seeing a rust here and some bubbling, but oh my word, as I lean down, always lean down and pull this seal back, look at the rust holes. This is due to rainwater coming through the doors. So I suspect from this right here and the other areas I've already shown you, we're going to find quite a bit of rust on this car. If you see any types of rust that I've already shown you, you want to get in the car and look at the floorboards, particularly the rear floorboards in the W123. Okay, look at this. We're getting some rust here. You can see what's happened is water's gotten in here, and this sound deadening material has trapped the moisture. So I suspect if we start peeling this away, we're going to find some problems. But I'm poking around here, and now I see a bigger problem up towards the front here, and this doesn't look pretty at all. Oh boy, look what I found here. We have a problem. And this is fairly common. I've seen this on quite a few 123s. You need to deal with this. If you just ignore it, it's going to get so bad that the seat will fall out of the car. Fortunately, structurally, as I'm shaking this seat, and the attach point right here is still pretty beefy, but this whole area around it is rusted through. You can even see the floor. So what we're going to do next is we're going to pull the seat out and get a real close look at this hole and talk about the options for repair. And then I'll at the same time explain why this happens on the W123 chassis. I've pulled the seat and I've done some preliminary scraping, and I think you're going to be surprised at what we see inside. There's a couple lessons to be learned here, and we'll kind of go over those. But the first question is, when I open the door and show you the floor, I want to ask you, well, do you still want to buy the car, okay? Is this something you would want to buy? So let's take a close look. In the first lesson, you've heard me say this time and time again. Remember, when you see a little rust, it's only the tip of the rustberg, and so is the case here. Well, I hope this doesn't shock you too much. You know, originally we just had a little hole right around here, but the more we probed, you can see the metal is badly rusted, and back in this corner it's starting to go through, so it's really weak in this area. And coming up into this area too, see, it's all the way up under this channel here. So this is a lot worse than initially appeared. And you know, I'm going to have to go talk to the owner. He wanted me to fix this, but when you're looking at this kind of rust right in here, it can be repaired, but it's very labor intensive. So let's talk a little bit more about the options, and I'll let you know what the owner has to say. Look at how dirty the shop floor is, and I've only just begun. If I got in there and really started to scrape that area away in preparation for repair work, it could become quite large. And it's something that, you know, is not easy in terms of time, but it's not difficult in terms of labor. So I talked to the owner, and you know, he's just not willing to pay to have the job done. It's just too expensive, and that's another good lesson from this car. You might be asking yourself, well, is the car worth saving? Yes and no. If you were willing to do the repair work yourself, because the rest of the car is so nice, I would say yes, it might be worth selling. You've heard me say before, when you see rust like this, run the other way. Generally, most cars that have this kind of rust, they're kind of beaters, if you know what I'm saying, and they're not worth fixing the rust and then fixing up a lot of other things on the car. But in this case, you've got rust issues to deal with, and pretty much everything else on the car is quite nice. So yes, it is repairable, but only if you do it yourself, because you're talking about a considerable amount of hours here. And if you do some math and add that up as a shop rate or a body shop rate, and of course the body shops are even going to be more expensive, because they're going to be talking about welding a new metal, which could cost thousands of dollars. You know, I use a Miracle Paint and Fiberglass cloth to do these type of repairs, and I was really hoping that we would get to use this beautiful car here to demonstrate how to do a floor repair, but it doesn't look like we're going to get to do it in this particular car, because the owner has said no, we're not going to repair the car. So we'll start looking for the next subject, okay? There's plenty around. We've got a couple cars outside that have water leak issues, water in the floor and water in the trunk, and those might become good candidates, because one of the things with the W123 chassis is this Water on the floor. Some of you know where that comes from, and some of you say, well, how can water get in on the floor? No, it's not coming through the sunroof. No, it's not coming through the door seals. It's coming from somewhere else. So in the next video in this series, we're going to show you an example of where this water comes from. We're going to try to stop it before it gets as bad as it got on this 123 240D here. So stay tuned for the next episode.